We're the first to earn carbon credits in Rwanda. There are a few other organizations on our heels with that. However, we have been delayed. We are trying to do something new, and the carbon market right now is just not quite as flexible as we want it to be. So we've been putting all of our resources for almost 3 years in breaking down that barrier so that Africa can be part of this market. And ultimately, once we're successful, we want to help other organizations do that. For-profit companies, non-profit companies, governments, other aid organizations combine the carbon market with humanitarian development, where accountability is provided by the market. In our case, if our systems fail, we first of all will try to hold ourselves accountable. If not, the government of Rwanda holds us accountable and can kick us out and prevent us from getting our credits. And then, of course, the UN validates our systems. A third party, actually, that we hire through the UN validates our systems every single year. So there's direct accountability to ensure the success. It's not just our word. Then there's also some personal elements of this. I work at NASA. Ron Garan is one of our co-founders. He's an astronaut that flew in space a few years ago. Prior to that, he was in Rwanda with us and gave a presentation to these kids at this orphanage. And before, they actually do have water and energy there now, but at the time this picture was taken, it was completely in the dark. They were drinking that dirty water I showed you earlier. The ridgeline in the back of that picture is the border with the Congo. And these kids are generally AIDS orphans, and most of them have HIV and are taking antiretroviral drugs provided by the United States. And Ron's giving a presentation about the space program. And at first, we didn't know how the kids would respond. Would they understand? Would they resent being shown this kind of stuff? It's a PowerPoint presentation being powered by a truck battery. But we thought it was too cool of an opportunity, and we were 3,000 miles away from NASA legal. Nobody else here works at NASA, right? Okay, so Ron gave this presentation, and afterwards, he said he got more intelligent questions from those kids than he gets from U.S. congressmen. There is broader applicability to this work. At NASA, we are looking at how to develop sustainable life support systems inspired by the work that we're doing in developing countries. And at least that's what my personal research is in, not the other way around. A lot of people try to pat NASA on the back for developing a technology and then spinning it off for the U.S. or for other countries or developing countries. In this case, it's the other way around. NASA can learn a lot about how to keep people alive and healthy on the moon or on Mars or on the way from here to Mars by the way that we do that every day by people all over the world are keeping themselves alive every day in harsh, difficult environments. This is one of our technologies we're developing now. It's a lunar regolith filter and solar distiller that looks an awful lot like what we do in Rwanda. And there's more personal impact to this. As I said, I actually started working on this stuff when I was an undergrad, and it's made me a better engineer at NASA, this work, not the other way around. This is the reason we do it, though. Primus is our star. This is one of our water treatment systems we put in a few years ago, and we needed a poster child to show all of our donors. And Primus ran off and put on his pink fleece, even though it was about 150 degrees out. And he carries this jug of water up, and he pours it through the system, comes back down, and that glass of water is the first clean glass of water Primus has ever had. And so that's the reason we do this work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was very instructive indeed. Our next speaker is going to be Dr. Dixon Despommier. Dr. Despommier is, let me find it, is an emeritus professor of public health and microbiology at Columbia University. For 27 years, he conducted NIH-sponsored laboratory-based research on a parasitic nematode, and his long-term interest centers on the environment and the ecology of infectious disease transmission. He co-authored a book on parasitic infections and authored another West Nile virus, the West Nile story. He has always been amazed at the wide variety of infectious agents that are transmitted at the agricultural interface through the use of raw, untreated human waste as fertilizer, and by inefficiency of traditional farming in improving ample food for everyone on the planet, especially now as a result of the tepid climate change. He's currently engaged in a project whose mission is to produce significant amount of food crop in tall buildings that are situated in densely populated urban centers. Vertical farming offers many advantages as described in the forthcoming book in October 2010, and exhibit featuring the vertical farm currently on display at the Chicago Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. Another exhibit on vertical farming is due to open in June 2010 at the Cooper Hewitt Museum in New York City, and Mr. Despommier received his BS in biology in Fairleigh Dickinson University, his MS from Columbia University, and a PhD in microbiology from the University of Notre Dame. You have the floor.
This was left on? On. Thank you for the invitation to speak this afternoon. I'm honored to be here, and I'd like to share with you some of the ideas that have emerged, believe it or not, from a classroom. And I see a lot of my students sitting out there smiling because they're part of this scene. And I've specifically asked them to come here today to see how this plays out in front of a larger audience. If we could learn how to grow our food in a safe way, which doesn't involve the use of human feces, for instance, which half of the world uses as fertilizer, this would be a much better place. And I'm sure Rita would definitely agree with me on this one. And there's an ecology to all of this that involves a mad cycle between the use of water and the use of human waste in order to make our food actually grow. So what you're about to hear is an alternative to that. We, in brief, very brief, we arose some 150,000 years ago from the verdant plains of East Africa, and from a world that has no beginning and no end, except, of course, it did have a beginning 4.9 billion years ago. But from our perspective, our life has been sustainable for at least the last 150,000 years of our history as essentially Homo sapiens. We, for all of but 15,000 years of that, lived as hunter-gatherers throughout the world. And then we created this other world for ourselves, which we labeled the technosphere. And with it came a terrible consequence, and that was the consequence of waste. Waste causes a lot of problems, and that's all we've been hearing about here, is how those problems impact human life. We all believe this too. I think I'm preaching to the converted here. We all deserve 2.3 liters of fresh water every day that's clean and safe, and 1,500 calories at least of food that's also clean and safe. But not everybody has that. These are the big challenges that we face. Safe water, safe food, environmental sustainability in the long-term sense of that word, and the reduction in fossil fuel use. Today, from those 15,000 years ago when there were no farms, today we find ourselves with 1 million people, perhaps. In just a short period of 15,000 years, we've advanced to 6.8 billion of us that now has an agricultural footprint the size of South America, and that does not include grazing animal space. The world's population continues to grow, and this is not a Malthusian approach to this subject, as you will see. I really don't have an opinion as to how many people should actually live on the planet, but I do have a very strong opinion as to how we should live our lives, and that everybody should live a similar safe life, and then have equal opportunities in their own cultures to achieve as we have had that advantage in ours. So some 50 years from now, I used to say, but now I have to say 40 years from now, we will have probably another 3 billion people arriving on this planet. So even if everyone here is happy with the way we feed ourselves and water ourselves now, which we're not, but let's say, just for sake of argument, we still have to do something for the next 3 billion people that show up, or this world will be even more chaotic than it appears to be now. So if 6.8 billion of us need this much land, another 3 billion will require the size of Brazil. That's a landmass that unfortunately doesn't exist because this is how much there is. This is not a NASA photograph, by the way, schematic, but good enough. And there's not a Brazil-sized landmass left to give to those next 3 billion people. So what will we do? Granted, agriculture has brought us to this level of numbers and also of the gift of technology